Greetings and welcome to the webinar, How to Get Cost-Efficient, Secure, and Scalable Data Storage in the Cloud. My name is Kurt Messersmith. I'm with Amazon Web Services, and we're very pleased to have you all here today. And we're also very pleased to welcome our friends from TwinStrata and NSK for today's webinar. I thought we'd start just really give you a little bit of a background about Amazon Web Services and how we really got to the cloud and really what cloud computing means to Amazon. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about cloud computing, or you're either using the cloud or in some capacity, or perhaps you're very curious and it's why you joined the webinar today. As you may know, Amazon has three very distinct businesses. We have the Amazon.com consumer retail business, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, and hopefully many of you are active customers. We also have what we call our seller business, and this is where third parties are able to build their own web stores and tap into the massive infrastructure that Amazon uses to handle all the e-commerce transactions and the fulfillment supply chain. And it was really the beginning of the seller business a few years ago when we really started building web services to enable developers at these third-party seller businesses to tap into the massive Amazon.com infrastructure. And at that time, about 5 years ago, that was really the genesis of building Amazon Web Services as a third distinct business. Today, we really call this cloud computing. Back 5, 6 years ago, we branded ourselves Amazon Web Services at the time because indeed these are web services that developers and IT managers can use to tap into massively scalable distributed infrastructure. I think it's important to point out but there's a general misperception in the marketplace that Amazon Web Services cloud computing is simply using excess capacity from Amazon.com. Actually, it's completely the opposite. Amazon.com is a customer of Amazon Web Services. We provide obviously a lot of infrastructure and services support. Amazon Web Services, as a distinct business, has been building out data center infrastructure and growing massively over the last 5 years globally. For example, we just launched data center and web services in the Singapore, Asia-Pacific region last year. And we also recently launched our cluster computing instances and HPC support in the cloud. So it's very much a distinct business, one that we're investing heavily in, one that's growing and expanding dramatically as cloud computing is growing as well. So really, what is Amazon Web Services and cloud computing? So when you think about cloud computing, we often really use the analogy of kind of a power plant or electricity. So you're really looking at massive compute power, storage, and other database email queuing, different services that we can build on top of that stack, if you will. And these services are designed to be massively scalable and global and really be available on demand all the time. And the beautiful thing about cloud computing and Amazon Web Services is it requires no capital infrastructure expenditure on the customer side. We do all the heavy lifting for you. These services are available on demand to you. You pay as you go, and we take care of all the heavy lifting regarding securing the servers, securing the data center, building all the services, making sure that it's highly durable, highly redundant, highly available. So when we think about AWS and cloud, it's just really a natural evolution in terms of what's happened in the IT industry over the last decade. I think one of the things I really want to drill into is that one of the more recent trends is really software as a service, probably over the last few years. And what we're seeing, a rapid development in industry and where cloud computing is really being an accelerator, is more and more applications are going from the traditional client server into a software as a service model. And companies are choosing not to really run any applications or software on premise, and they're also looking to really remove a lot of their IT expenditures and outsource those to the cloud as well. And one of the benefits of using AWS cloud computing infrastructure in the software as a service model is we provide a very flexible environment for developers and IT managers. So if you want to run Windows instances in our cloud, you can do so. We also support many different flavors of Linux on our infrastructure services, so you can launch Red Hat Novell. You can also support Amazon. You can support Ubuntu. If you're a PHP or Java developer, we've got you covered. If you're a .NET developer as well. So we provide a lot of support to developer community and really giving you a lot of flexibility to kind of pick your poison in terms of how you want to administer cloud computing services and how you want to run software as a service. So I really won't go into a lot of detail about each and every one of these services. I wanted to really just kind of present a general framework for how Amazon Web Services is organized. So again, we're an infrastructure as a service. So what that means is we're really providing you right down to the machine level compute and storage. And once you build up on top of that, you can see that we've also added several services like our Hadoop implementation is called Amazon Elastic MapReduce. We've got a content delivery network service called Amazon CloudFront. You can see a lot of the other tools and consoles and support that we provide on top of those basic building block infrastructure services, compute, storage, and database. And as you can see, we've got multiple database services. We've got multiple support options for storage. And our partner ecosystem is building on top of these partner building blocks. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as the webinar proceeds. But what's important to note is we make these tools and these services highly programmable. So developers and IT managers can take advantage of all these services to really control the environment and control the way they're provisioning resources for their IT infrastructure. So I really wanted to talk at a high level how Amazon Web Services is truly a global infrastructure. When you think about it, we actually have several regions that we support, including the US, Europe, and Asia. Within each of these regions, we have what we call availability zones. And in these availability zones, think of those as actually distinct data centers that we build out in that region. So, for example, we have availability zones in the US for our East region, for our West region, same with Western Europe, same with Singapore. We continue to expand as the business and cloud computing demand grows. And each of these availability zones and these distinct data centers have their own isolated electricity power supply. They also are on separate floodplains. We make sure that these availability zones are completely separate and isolated to ensure that if there's any catastrophic event, God forbid a meteor would hit the east coast of the United States, that we'd still be able to have some fault tolerance and failure and fault separation built in so that the services that you're running in the cloud, the storage that you're running in the cloud is available to you 100% of the time. One of the things I really want to point out is when you actually when you're using our storage service and you put objects into the cloud, you get to decide where that object is stored. So for example, if you're a customer in Europe and you want to use our Amazon S3 storage service, we will make multiple copies of that object that you put in the cloud with no extra cost, but we will keep it in the region that you're in. So if you're in the EU, you want your data to stay in the EU, it will stay in the EU, unless, of course, you decide to make multiple copies or use the S3 service in other regions like the US or Asia. So the availability zones within a region are really there to ensure 100% uptime and reliability and durability of your data and infrastructure services that you're using in the cloud. But it's important to note, from a storage and data point of view, you have full control on where that data is located. So just wanted to kind of quickly highlight what we're seeing are some trends in industry. And when Amazon Web Services started several years ago, we obviously had a lot of traction with startups in the SMB segment. It made a lot of sense for those companies not to build out their own IT infrastructure and capital expenditure, rather use cloud computing as a variable or operating expense. And what we're also seeing is a trend in the enterprise that more and more enterprises are using cloud computing. And here's some of the use cases that we commonly see. One of the things that's not listed here is disaster recovery. That's one that we often hear is a common initial use case. Media distribution, backup recovery, high-performance computing, these are all very common scenarios. And the TwinStrata and NSK team will talk a little bit more about storage in the cloud, which is also a very common use case. So just want to kind of wrap up with talking a little bit about the benefits of using AWS and cloud computing. As I mentioned earlier, flexibility is very important to developers. We don't lock you into a certain operating system or a tool set at the application or platform level. As an infrastructure service, developers and IT managers have complete flexibility. It's cost effective. You pay only for what you use. There's no contractual arrangements or upfront fees. You don't have to have a relationship with an Amazon salesperson to launch instances and be up in the cloud in minutes. It's massively scalable. The same expertise that we use to build Amazon.com infrastructure 10, 15 years ago, we use that same expertise to build massively scalable infrastructure for Amazon Web Services. And security is very important to us. It's actually our #1 operating principle. And if you go to the aws.amazon.com/security page, you'll see that we are very aggressive in working with accreditation, compliance, and certification boards to make sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that Amazon Web Services and Cloud Computing is extremely secure. And that includes recent news around PCI compliance, SAS 72 certification, ISO certification. If you go to our security site, you'll see that we're very busy in that space. We also have a white paper that goes into great detail about how we secure our infrastructure and storage services. And just one final comment. I mean, I think a lot of you on the webinar today, these are some of the things that you've been thinking about. Really trying to understand what's the value proposition in the cloud, really trying to get comfortable with security, really understanding what are some of the first steps in getting into the cloud. A lot of developers are eager to get into the cloud, but they really have to think about how they're architecting applications, software as a service, how they're architecting for massive scale, how they may architect applications across multiple regions, multiple availability zones. So these are some of the challenges that CIOs and developers face. But what we're seeing is just a really great trend and a lot of adoption of AWS in the enterprise and SMB. And there's just a lot of momentum in that regard. And as you can tell, AWS is very aggressive with our product roadmap. We're bringing out new services and updates every week. And we really are excited to have all of you interested in using the cloud. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our friends at TwinStrata, who are going to tell you a little bit more about how they're using their storage service and cloud array on Amazon Web Services. As I mentioned earlier, our partner ecosystem is very important to us. We have hundreds of solution providers in industry that are building applications and innovation on top of AWS to support customers like yourself. And we're very excited to have TwinStrata here to tell you a bit more about that.